again, this is UML Operator. Okay, we're in part 2 of a 3-part series. In our last session, we registered some data in our Reusable Asset Service. We created some storage areas in the SQL instance for patterns, reference data, and training models. So we have 3 storage areas. One's for reference data, one's for training models. So there was a particular training model that we brought in. You can double click and you can look at any models that you brought in. And one was for patterns. In this session, we're going to be talking about reuse of the RAS storage area, finding and managing reuse, and importing the RAS data into a new project. If you didn't watch part 1, I'll put a link above, and I would suggest that you go back and watch that before proceeding. But if you feel comfortable, go ahead and continue. So let's go back to our cloud instance. We could go SQL or we can go cloud. Matter of fact, let me show you SQL to show you that the database looks exactly the same. So let's go into the SQL instance. All right, and you'll see in RAS storage in this root folder, now we have patterns, reference data, and training models. We've got one pattern. Again, we can add notes here. The properties really aren't that interesting. The version number doesn't represent 0, 1 or the version. And reference data, you're not going to see anything because it's a file, not a model. But you can see that I'm in the SQL instance, and in the SQL database, I have the storage and these namespaces for these storage areas. From this SQL instance, just as in any instance, I can go to Reusable Asset Service. I can log into the particular RAS instance. We're not changing anything. I'm going to go to the storage area where patterns are, and I'm able to see the metadata and so on. All right. All right. So finding and managing your storage items, your reuse items in RAS. If I right click on this pattern and I select Find in Browser, it's not in this SQL instance, so package not found. Therefore, I'm not able to do compare with package in model. I'm not able to use these features. I certainly can delete the particular item. I can import also from here the same item. I can bring in the same item if I was in the registry, and maybe I'll try to show you that in a little bit here. So where is this model? Where I told everyone it's in my local UML repository, but I didn't exactly say which one. So I, as the author, know where this particular pattern is. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to that instance, right? And then from this instance, I'm going to log into RAS. And we're going to select this, and we're going to log into RAS. I am going to go to patterns. This is where this instance is. Now, this is a very large project. There's a lot going on. It's like, oh my goodness, where is this? I can right click on this, find in browser, look at that. It found it immediately in the browser because it's in the RASing in the instance where that diagram is. And I can do things like, run a compare. If there was one, there's no changes have been made. If I've made changes in this pattern, I could go from RAS and do a compare and go, oh, I need to update this pattern within the Reusable Asset Service, and I could do this from here. The same thing goes for, if I go to the demo and I log into RAS, let's go to Publish RAS, and we're going to log into RAS, and I'm going to go to Training Models. If I right click on this, because this diagram is in this project, it goes right to it and it finds it, all right? And I'm able to do compares, managing changes and so on that are taking place from the primary or the authoring point where I'm managing it back into the reusable asset instance that I've chosen to share this particular diagram. So let's talk a little bit more about managing our reusable assets. All right, so in this particular component diagram, if I select the package that it is in and I hit Control, Alt, and B, you can see I have versioned this a few times over the last, over several minutes, and I can delete and make changes. So I can manage my versions. I can restore back to a particular baseline. I can do a lot within the area, the instance, the project where I am managing the model, all right? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna make some changes to this diagram. So I'm gonna come up here and I'm going to remove this dependency, and I am going to, let's see here, I want to put in, pretty much have done everything. That's the only change I'm going to make. I probably could go into notes and just, put some notes of component 1 and then component 3, just to put some changes on this that are very simple, right? So I am not going to do a baseline compare, but I'm going to go to the registry for this. I am now going to compare to the model. And you can see there's been some changes, right? So if I go into component 1, hey, in this date and time, from the baseline, which is the reusable asset, to this model, we added some notes and we called it component 1. Like, oh, component 3 has some changes. Same thing. We just added a name. And if I go to links, you can see red. And I talk about baselining in another video, but red means it was removed. So in the original baseline, we had a dependency. In the model, we don't. So you're able to look at your changes and do compares from your reusable asset storage area back to the originating source. But you have to be in the originating source. So what we're going to do next is we are going to version in Reusable Asset Service this changed model. So to do this, we're just going to select the package, which is this component package that we want to version. All right, so what I'm going to do now is select register, right? It knows what package it's in. The latest registry is 01. This is going to be 0.2. Check, check, double check. Don't need to check dependencies, there aren't any. And we're going to hit register. And let me show you, right? So when I go to this, this is now version 02, done at this date and time. And if I go over to reviews, I now have a blank area where I can do reviews on version 2 of this particular model. So let's go back to the storage area, and I'm going to go to cloud this time instead of SQL, right, to be a little bit different. And you'll see that under training models, I now have 2, right? Notes I put on the first one, now I have this new one. Now again, it's not versioning. I'm seeing the create and modified times that are different, but I'm not getting a version number that is here for this artifact. Again, it's an artifact type, right? So I'm going to go back to notes. I can add additional notes here to readers that are in the storage area for these artifacts, all right? I can bring an artifact in. I can have discussions, collaboration. I can do reports on artifacts and those kind of things. But in this case, I'm going to delete it from this diagram. And that'll be the changes. So if I add more patterns, the same pattern, I'm going to see artifacts for each one of those. I can manage those. Another interesting thing that I can do that I usually do, not every day per se, but you'll set the practice when you want to do this. I can actually Control, Alt, and B and create a baseline for this root node and all of its sub packages. So I'm just going to create a baseline here on this date and time. I'm not going to put any other nodes, just accept all that. So now this is baseline. So as people are checking things in, managing, making changes to items that are in the registry, we'll go ahead and log back in under these storage areas. You're able to actually when you're in the SQL instance, manage baselines from your browser for that storage area. So let you determine whether you want to do that. I'm just telling you that in this demo, we only have 3 storage areas. We only have 1 item in each one of them. You're going to get to a point where you have, 6, 12 or more storage areas and dozen or dozens of models in each one of them across a dozen or more team members or modelers. And you're going to want to make sure that you've got the right governance and practices in place to properly manage your reusable asset repositories. So let's create a new project. We're literally going to call it new project. I'm going to hit save. There we go. So now we have a new project, completely blank. There are no patterns. There's no documents, templates. There is no, if I go to settings, UML types, tag values, there's no tag values. If I go to design and glossary, there's no glossary, it's completely blank, and so on. There's no reference data, it's a completely blank project. So let's go ahead and log into RAS and bring in our reference data. All right, I'm going to leave glossary up here, and we're going to go to publish. I'm going to go to RAS. I'm going to click the triple dots. I'm going to log into this RAS instance, and I'm already on reference data. It's the first one here, and I want to go to file storage. I want this reference data. This is complete reference data for UML demo projects only. So I'm creating a blank demo project and I want this reference data. So I just simply select import. And Sparx highlights everything for you. You could certainly pick and choose saying, hey, I just want the glossary and hit import. You can hold down the control key. I want the authors, and I want tag values, and it will only import the items you selected, but I want everything, so I can hit shift. As I select this one, I'm going to go down to hold down the left shift, click the last one, it's selecting all of them for me, and I'm going to hit import, right? So from the RAS repository, it brought in all that reference data that fast, right? And now if I go to glossary, I have to refresh it. So go to design, refresh, there we go. So now I have the glossary. If I go to reports, I now have my reports. If I go down to patterns, I now have my patterns. If I go to settings, UML types, and tag values, look at that, I have my tag values. So it brought in all the reference data that I wanted. It brought in images. I only had 2. I had 2 logos in here, the UML operator logo, maybe another logo. So it brought in everything that I wanted to bring in for this particular new project that fast. Instead of dealing with export XML reference data and then putting that into a file share and then importing it every time you create a project, the modelers can just log into RAS and quickly bring in these assets. Okay, so we brought in reference data. Let's close glossary. We're still logged into the RAS repository, which is good. And what we want to do is we're going to go to project and we're going to create some folders. We're going to create one called training models, no diagram, package only. And we're going to create another one called pattern training, no diagram, just package only. I want main at the top and I want patterns at the bottom. So the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to go over to training models. We only have one model in here and we're on the training model package over in the browser and we're going to select import. So here we go. Yes. Yes. And there we go. We've brought in that diagram. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go down to pattern training folder, go back to Reusable Asset Service. We're going to go to patterns and we're going to bring in this model. So we've got it selected. We're on the browser point where we want to bring it in and we're going to select import. Yes. Thank you very much. And there it is. So now we have this pattern model in here as well as our training model in here. So we're going to wrap up here part 2 of a 3-part series. And in the next session, part 3, we're going to be talking about GUIDs, global unique IDs and conflicts, proper method of reuse, some tips there, some continued learning, more importantly, administrating your reusable asset service. All right, so we're going to be talking about that. So I look forward to seeing you in the next session. Thanks very much, and I'll talk to you all later.